5 2. This is episode 3 of our Secret Invasion podcast episode. And it's been a few days, I'll be honest, since I watched it. So Brandon's going to take the lead on this episode. We're recording episode 3 and 4 back to back.
Hell yeah.
So Brandon's going to take the lead on this one. I'll maybe chime in a bit more on episode 4. But take it away, Brandon.
Hi, so we'll start with non-spoilers. Honestly, just like the other ones, just like, you kind of know what to expect at this point. I think it does build off from what I remember from episode 2. For us, it's been like a while since episode 2's happened, so just to jog my memory, I think it does carry on from the story beats they left off, um, pretty well. They get into the sort of relationship between Nick Fury and his wife a little bit more. So they explain that sort of situation, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Um, so yeah, we get some more Ben Mendelsohn, which is a freaking, you know, thing I always like in Secret Invasion. He's like the highlight for me. Um, yeah, I think I don't know. Yeah, there's not too much that happens. It is a shorter episode, which honestly I kind of liked because today I was watching back like episodes 3 and 4 back to back, so I was like, sweet, not like long ass episodes I need to watch 2 hours worth. Um, yeah. So yeah, honestly, just keep this non spoilers kind of brief, I suppose. Like that's all there's to say about it, I believe. Unless there's anything you remember to bring up.
Honestly, it has been a good bit since I watched it. I mean, yeah, I can't. I don't know really. I mean, it was a good enough episode. I thought it was probably one of the, in terms of just the other two episodes we already have at this point, probably leaning towards this is my least favorite of the three.
Okay.
I don't. Maybe once you start talking and you jog my memory, maybe my mind will switch on that. But
Yeah.
from what I remember a lot more from episodes 1 and 2,
Yeah.
and
But is that
obviously
because
they were
like
longer
we
episodes.
talked about them the day we watched them, you
Could
know,
be,
compared
but
to
like I
this
said,
one?
I watched episode 3 on the plane home from Paris,
Yeah.
so it was at like 10 o'clock at night, so like maybe I just maybe
Yeah.
I just forgot. But so that could be part circumstance. But
That's
yeah,
right.
okay. I mean, general thoughts then for you before we go into
I
spoilers, because I don't
think
think there is actually
I,
much to say about spoiler
I
free, right?
think episode 1 at this point is still my favorite out of the 3. But I think it's better than episode 2. I think a little bit more happens in episode 2. I think episode 2 is a lot more just talky. Too much talking, not a lot of stuff actually happening, just talks. But honestly, it's not that big of a difference. Like, but when I say that, I mean like it's by a tiny margin. It's not like I'm like, oh yes, episode 3 is massively better than 2. It's like, nah, they're pretty much the same. Just if I was to pick, I'd probably say 3 was a little bit better. Um,
Right.
yeah.
So, I guess this is your spoiler warning to our lovely audience. So I
Spoilers.
think we're going on to spoilers. So that was a nice, succinct, almost useless spoiler-free talk.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's not much to say about this episode really.
There's
Uh,
not too much.
so take it away, Brandon. What do we open with on episode 3,
Well, I
if you
believe
remember?
we open with just Fury with the wife, or there's a flashback. I think at the start, and I think it's like 1998, and he meets her in the cafe.
Right.
Again, CGI de-aging is fantastic. Like Marvel's nailed it, man. Like they make it look pretty
Yep.
seamless, in my opinion. Especially Nick Fury. Like, oh my god, Sam Jack. Like he just looks great. And I wasn't sure, I assumed they did the same to the woman, um, which also looked really good because I couldn't even tell. I was like, that's a real person, and it's like, oh damn. The only thing I did point out notice was maybe that her voice still sounded like an elderly woman rather than however old she was supposed to be. That's the only thing that took me out a little bit. Um, which I have noticed with
Right.
other films that do the same thing. For example, Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones. Like he looks like he's 30 something years old, but he sounds like he's 70. So it's like, so I kind of got that from her scene there. But yeah, so it kind of establishes that he does know she's a Skrull then, right? Like that's what that kind of set up. Like he knew from the start that
Yeah, I think,
she was,
like
because
we
that was
said
the
in the
question
last
we were
episode,
posing to each other. Like, oh, does he know?
yeah, it was hard, right? Because I think we all agreed that he did know. It wasn't really like we were set on,
Yeah.
oh, he might not know, because I don't think that's what they were pushing anyway. And I guess with more context from this episode and the next one, like you clearly know that he's fully aware that she's been a Skrull the whole time, and I
Hmm.
think even probably met her in her Skrull form, right?
Yeah.
So, um, yeah.
Yeah, man.
So, so what did they talk about in the cafe?
They, honestly, I think it was just them telling the audience like, oh, so you've taken this look. Like, where'd you get this look from, and all that stuff. And he's like, oh my god, is that you? Because he wasn't sure it was her, obviously, because he's never seen her look like that before. Um, but we
Like
find
he'd
out
be
later
that
down the
guy
line
running.
in episode 4, like how that came about. But we'll get to that when we get to that.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
in the present day, right?
So yeah, go to present. I can't remember what exactly happened as soon as we got back. Um, I believe it was probably Gravik. I do remember a scene with him and Talos in the cafe, and he's essentially just like teasing him. He's like, "Oh, Gaia." He keeps bringing up his daughter, and then he goes to strangle him or something, and then everyone in the cafe turns into Skrull. And I'm like, "Oh, I did like that.
Right.
I like that a little bit." I was like, "Oh, okay." Um,
Yeah, it gave me John Wick vibes.
yeah, yeah,
You know it the when he gets excommunicated, when
hmm
he's excommunicado, and then like everyone in Central Park stops. It kind of reminded me of that bit.
yeah. I did like that because that's
I did
honestly
think,
that's what I'm looking for in the Scrolls thing. I'm like, I want that sort of
right.
feeling where, oh
Well,
my god, like we don't even know, because that seems
I
so
guess
like out of nowhere at the time.
it kind of, yeah, it kind of ties into maybe what I was saying. I was saying about the combat, but I feel like maybe it's a problem in general with the scrolls so far is that they don't have much style to them to kind of differentiate them from
Hmm.
other villains or other characters we've seen. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously they're shapeshifters, so like you don't want to see them. They're undercover, right? They're not meant to be like in the public eye all the time. But
Hmm.
I still think you can have really interesting like visuals and scenes and combat, especially
Yeah.
between with that premise. And I think that's the kind of vibe I was hoping for as well. Is at least they're using the subject matter to its advantage in this scene.
Hmm.
A big criticism I have with the scene though is I find Ben Mendelsohn's delivery and just performance in general much more intimidating than I find Gravik,
Well,
and
I
that should
was
not be
gonna
the
say
case
that because last episode I was kind of like
because
I was kind of I was defending Gravik in last episode, but I won't lie. After watching this episode, I was kind of like, he's not
yeah,
intimidating, is he? He
he's
doesn't
not
have that
intimidating at all.
presence
And
of like,
and
I'm
the
scared
bad
of
thing
him.
is he's supposed to have that presence over Ben Mendelsohn, and Ben Mendelsohn overshines him
Yeah.
completely in that scene.
Yeah.
And it's whether I don't know. I was thinking about this, especially after seeing episode 4 as well. I won't talk about specifics, but
Hmm.
I get the feeling that it's maybe the actor.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's what
Yeah.
he's been given. Obviously, the director's probably telling him what he wants from the actor. But I do think part of it is could be the actor himself because
Well, the thing is,
I don't know.
it's from the
It's
looks
hard,
of it,
right?
it's a different I swear it was a different director for episode 3 and 4.
No, I know, but like if there's like a coherent character you want to keep throughout the whole series, so maybe like a creative director or something like that,
Yeah.
who's come up with what this character should look, sound, and feel like. Whoever that person is, I don't think they've done a good job
Hmm.
getting that from page to screen. Somewhere along, like probably on the page, all these things work, but connecting up those dots and whittling your way down to what we see on screen, somewhere along the way that's not worked.
Yeah.
And I don't want to blame the actor. It's easy to go for the actor, right? Because they're the guy on screen. So maybe that's a bad call.
Yeah,
But
it is. But at the end of the day, it's like from our point of view, that's what we're looking at. So it's like,
yeah,
if so, it's like at the end of, if we're seeing bad acting, we can only assume it's the actor right now until, because like it's hard to blame the director if everyone else is doing a great job. You know what I mean? So it's like, because like Nick Fury's doing great. I think Emilia Clarke's doing pretty well. I think
right.
obviously Ben Mendelsohn's doing great. So everyone's doing their job. But this guy, I'm not buying, and I do kind of think it's the actor. Maybe it's just the look of him as well. Maybe I'm just not intimidated by the look of him
I think part of it might even
either.
just be the accent. because he's trying to be a common guy, right? He's speaking with like a British accent,
Yeah,
and he uses slang and stuff. But it's like fair enough. I think that can be intimidating in films like Snatch, like
right.
based in Britain, and you have like really like Cockney or like just dirty English accents, and they work.
Yeah.
But in this, when you've got well, that's like a good point you made is like everyone's firing on all cylinders pretty
Hmm.
much. And I think the thing is, Gravik might work in a show where I don't know. Gravik actually gives me a bit of like Dark Elf vibes from Thor: Dark World. He's just
Right.
a bit bland. Like
Yeah,
he's just
you're not gonna remember him.
I'm not gonna remember Gravik unless he really picks up in in like the latter half of this series. I'm
Yeah,
really not. Gravik's never gonna stay in my mind beyond this series.
yeah,
Not for his performance anyway, or like not for what
sure.
he's actually putting forward. The thing that really bugs me about it as well is, and this is why I say I think it works probably on the screen on the page but not the screen, is I feel like everything he's actually doing should be intimidating, and every situation he's creating for the protagonists is putting them in a pickle, right? Like he's
Yeah.
actually got the upper hand on these characters, and that's why it's bugging me so much because I feel like he has got them by the balls, and in this scene he has Ben Mendelsohn by the balls, but I don't buy it. And there's a big thing in episode 4 as well where he has the characters by the balls, and I'm just not feeling it, and it's really, really not great.
Hmm.
Uh, but that was my big criticism of this episode was that when I loved that scene, and I thought Ben Mendelsohn absolutely fucking nailed it. But
He's
just
just so good though in general, So
yeah,
he's actually my favorite part of the show. He's so good.
even as a protagonist, he's still got like that kind of mess with my daughter and I'll absolutely fuck you up behind the bar vibe as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Speaking of
so I can't
British
fault.
accents, we go down to Portsmouth in this episode,
Yeah,
which I thought was
and
pretty
I had
funny.
to rewind the episode because he says it like off the cuff. To
Yeah.
be honest, there's fuck all there,
Honestly, I had
right?
to rewind it because I was like, did I hear that right?
Yeah.
I was
Well,
like,
the thing
oh
is as
yeah,
well, it doesn't help that Sam Jackson has like American accent and
yeah.
he's saying it like a British person would. Whereas
Mhm.
when you hear American people say British place names, they tend to do it wrong because Brits are lazy at pronouncing their own names.
Yeah,
So
they pronounce it too well, whereas yeah, yeah,
yeah,
no, I know
you would
exactly.
expect Portsmouth.
Yeah.
That's what you'd expect.
I
Um,
actually like this part of the episode though. Probably it's one of my favorite part was the whole airplane sort of submarine situation, and then infiltrating the house, try to get the passcode out of the man, and all that jazz. I like the back and forth between Nick and Talos. Just because like Nick's like freaking like ruthless, like to the point where he's like put a gun to a freaking kid's face. So it's like, whoa, okay, okay, bro. Like, I get it's important, but like, this, this is a little too far. But not for Nick Fury. Um, the kid was the kid was he a Skrull or was he human? I was a little bit confused with that because the real dad's human, right? So and he didn't die. It was the Skrull that ended up dying. He got shot by Talos. But the kid would have been
right.
just a human, right? Or I don't know. I'm a little bit confused with that bit because they wouldn't have had a mole Skrull child take place of the human kid.
Yeah, no, I think probably
So it's probably a human kid, yeah. Um, honestly, I don't want to like crap on the kid, but his acting wasn't really good either. It just didn't. It was like I know he was like such minimal part of the episode, but like I was like, oh mate, like
it's all important, eh?
you've not acted
And the
much,
thing is,
have
we've
you?
seen
Just
it's not like child actors. Like child actors nowadays tend to be pretty stellar usually, right?
yeah, it's like
If you
a
find
high
the right
bar
one.
nowadays, like with Stranger Things and stuff. Like, yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's a pretty high bar. So when you see like bad child acting, you're like you pick it up now. Like, oh yes, there we go. Not that he was like outstandingly bad.
Awful.
It just didn't feel natural. It just the way his head moved and stuff. Like, it was whatever. I don't want to like link on it too
Right.
much. Yeah, I thought the
Well,
tension for the scene was pretty good.
I was just gonna say the same thing. I thought it was done quite well.
Yeah,
Um,
and this is me just coming out from watching Mission Impossible as well, which is like filled to the bits with tension. So it's like I've kind of tensioned out this week, but
a
that
little
was
plug for our possibly one of the
yeah, man.
upcoming
No,
episodes.
I'm definitely
Yeah.
going to talk about Mission Impossible as soon as you've seen it. Um, yeah, no, yeah, really like this part. I was a little bit confused what the relationship between Talos and Gaia was at this point. So when he called her, I was like, "All right, you're like on proper speaking terms." Because the last time I remember them talk was like the whole bag situation, right? When they swapped the bags and then everything
Yep.
blew up. So I was kind of confused. Like, wait, I thought these were like in a huff, but
Did they
whatever.
not have a see after the bags blew up, right? And they didn't follow through on saving the people from the terrorist attack and stopping it. Is is there been a scene where Talos talks to Gaia about what the fuck happened?
I don't remember.
Because I can't remember either, and if there is, I can remember it, and if there's not, that's a problem, I think.
Yeah,
Because from his point of view, obviously it's his daughter, but you've kind of got to have the thing cross your mind of, oh shit, is she like lied to me, and like this is gonna head anyway,
yeah. No, it was a
right?
little bit confusing. Um, but yeah, because it's been a couple of weeks for me anyway. So when it happened, I was like, oh wait, I didn't realize they were on speaking terms. Like, oh, just like call you up and get a passcode out of you. But I don't remember the conversation they had to begin with. So yeah, so following that, obviously Gaia kind of showed her true colors, as in like she's more loyal to her father than Gravik's cause, kind of thing. Um, so she like infiltrates her own base, goes for all that, and then she looks for the person's memories. And I think she just guesses the password. I don't think she actually finds it out, or at least we weren't shown that she found out. It looked like she just guessed that the son's name would be the password, but is what is, whatever. I'm not gonna look too deep into that.
I reckon that's probably partly because when Amelia Clark's on set, she doesn't see the CGI stuff that we see,
Yeah.
like the visions. She's like sorting through stuff. She's like, "Oh, I found a password," and then like they've just plastered over a bunch of like random crap
Oh
over
yeah,
it,
exactly.
so it's a bit unclear, right?
So
But
she makes a run for it, and then, what do you know? Gravik finds her running away. Uh,
somehow knows she's there at that point
yeah,
in time, right? And that's how she's gonna leave, and she know she fell off her bike like a
yeah.
twat.
So, for
Yeah,
me, even though I'm not a massive fan of Gravik, I would say this is by far his best sort of moment that he's had, because it kind of, for me, this is the only time he had a little bit of presence. It goes away next episode, but like at least for this one scene, I kind of felt like, oh damn, because he shoots her, and he thinks he's
do you
killed
know
her, right? So
specifically what it is that maybe is the differentiating factor
just
between
surprised of
what
it,
we've seen before? No,
like just the
just it's so is it more the context rather than his actual
yeah,
performance? You mean
yeah, but at least like I forget about the
at least there's something
performance
there,
when the actions happen because I'm just like surprised. I'm like, because
right?
I bought into. I was like, oh my god, like they've just killed her. I'm like, there's no way they killed off freaking Emilia Clarke's character 3 episodes in. No way have they done that.
I I got kind of annoyed like because I watched these episodes
Yeah,
separated, so I watched so like on Friday well I was on the plane, but I was like, oh shit, like okay. Like I was intrigued, but I was also annoyed because I was like, it felt strange to have a big selling point of this series be one that Emilia Clarke's in it, but two that she's kind of the which side is she on
yeah,
character, and then you find that out very quickly in this episode, and then like you have confirmation of it kind of thing because we had like sprinkles of it before, but we were like, oh, she could be helping him still, it could be a trap, whatever. But you get like, oh, she's actually on her dad's
yeah,
side, and then straight away she's killed, and I was like, oh, so that's that entire mystery of her gone then
yeah.
straight away, which was a bit naff, but like I guess for stakes, it's quite a good.
It's a good what do you call it? End an episode. You're like, oh damn,
Like
like
a
where
hook
did you go now?
for the next one, yeah.
But obviously for me, I just clicked next episode and it started, so I found out instantly what happened after that. But for the moment, I thought it was
Well,
pretty
I think
decent. Can't lie.
again that comes back to what we were saying maybe a couple of weeks ago, is that this show has, I think, really, I think for me, is kind of part of the reason it's maybe not the best it could be is because it's trying to wrestle what it is
Yeah,
in terms of how they're putting this out to the public.
yeah,
Because I think things in this show work well if you had like a binge format where they put all 6 episodes up at once and you can watch them back to back. There's elements in this series that would be better suited to that
Mm-hmm.
format. But then there's obviously things written into the scripts of each episode, like this moment, that are meant to keep you watching the next one
Yeah.
for next week. The problem is, in episode 4, this is going to be spoilers for episode 4. I'm not going to talk about what it is specifically, but they resolve this whole thing in the very beginning of episode
Yeah.
4. So you get a very clear cut answer of where we're headed next, sort of thing. And this was supposed to kind of be your up in the air moment where, oh shit, one of our protagonists has just bit the
Mm-hmm.
dust. And then in the next episode, it's kind of like Jeremy Clarkson meme is, oh, anyway,
Yeah.
sort of thing,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a bit like that, and it's like those that format. To be honest, I don't think that decision. I think that's probably a bad decision for both formats. So maybe that's not the best example, but just this episode ending on a hook in itself is an example of them trying to appeal to that format of showing you this of the weekly
Yeah.
format, right?
Yeah.
Which is fine, but and that's kind of what TV is nowadays. So
Especially
that's not really
subscription,
supposed
because
to like
like
complain about this,
they're
but
making you want to pay to continue. That's the whole point.
yep,
So it's like obviously we're gonna criticize it for the story aspect of it, but in the filmmaking part of it, I'm not gonna pat them on the back for being like, oh yeah, well done, well get your subscriptions. Like no, you should be able to just make good
yeah.
TV, and that's enough to keep paying.
I think this is probably because we've kind of rounded out where the episode is. We might still have some more talking points, but Robert's not here. If
If you
you've
haven't
watched
noticed already.
episodes 1 and 2 so far, yeah, if you've watched episode 2, 1 and 2 before this one, Robert's not here for this episode, and he's not going to be here for episode 4 either. But he should be back for episode 5 and 6. Fingers
Hopefully.
crossed, right? But whenever he comes back, he'll give his thoughts on everything he's missed as well. So there'll probably be like a catch up portion of an episode where he talks about all these episodes as
Indeed.
well. So if you want to hear, because we actually don't know Robert's opinion on these, or
I
I don't
don't
anyway,
know. No,
on these
no,
episodes either. So that'll be new, and we can react to that probably with the knowledge of having seen the whole series. I think if you just had these 3 episodes in, I think I was pretty happy with these first 3 episodes as part of a series. Like, obviously this isn't like closure in the series, and obviously there's a lot of open
yeah.
questions, and they're just kind of getting going. But this like little 3 episode thing, I think works better than what come. Obviously, episode 4 is not the end of the series either, so I can't judge it as a whole series yet. But I do think I 4 takes the series down a notch for me. I think
Okay.
in terms of retroactively thinking about these
Yeah.
episodes. But I think as like a 3 piece set, these first 3 episodes, they're pretty good. I think they have some really good moments in them.
Yeah.
They have some strange decisions as well. Um, but I think they handle the Skrull thing kind of well so far. I do think there might be a bit of like an avalanche of just what the fuck towards, because this is what tends to happen with the Marvel shows, right? You tend to have a pretty strong like 3 or 4 episode run,
hmm
and then your last 2 episodes are just
It's always the
wild as shit.
landing. Like, how do they land? It's that's the thing with the Marvel shows. Like, how did they end it? What's it gonna sell? Um, I was gonna make a point with the Marvel shows. I have another point as well, but I think my other point will make more sense for the next episode, so I'll save it for that. But this point
Mhm.
is, I think this is more of a point of Marvel currently as well, just in general, is that it doesn't feel like any of the TV shows fit in with each other, like at all. They don't interact with each other. They don't, they don't they don't change anything about the other shows. I think the only interaction we've had that's been in both shows is Rudy from Winter Soldier to this one, the Falcon Winter Soldier to this one. I think that's the
Yep,
only character that's been in 2 shows,
like a through line.
from my memory. Like nothing feels like it's connected. It's like my point is like, so it's supposed to be a big deal that all the scrolls is like the whole scroll invasion's happening and all that stuff, but you don't. I know you shouldn't feel that in the other shows, but it just feels like it's a different universe, a different, like, it's a complete different thing. It doesn't feel related at all. It feels like its own contained story, which I feel like the scroll shouldn't be. The scroll should kind of affect everything because you don't
I
know
think
where they
this has
are.
been
They could be anywhere. That's the whole point.
we so we'd said in the first couple episodes that we are not aware of what happens in the comics with
Yeah.
Secret Invasion. I do know that Secret Invasion is a much bigger event in the comics than it is in
Hmm.
this,
And it could
in
be
the
setting up
MCU
because
so
we've got
far.
like Secret Wars coming up, right? So I'm assuming that's like connected.
Honestly, I think Secret Wars is Kang. I don't think
I
Secret
have
Wars has
no
anything to
idea.
do with
I have
Skrulls.
no idea.
Even though Secret's in the thing is, thematically it would make sense, right? Because you've got Secret in the name, and obviously I haven't checked this since we brought it up before, but I'm pretty certain that Secret Wars is a Kang related event rather than a Skrull related event. But I think a big thing with this as well is I think a lot of the criticism from people who have read the comics is the scale of this story. Is I get it's a spy espionage thing, but I think when you hear the word Secret Invasion as a comic fan, that's probably not what you wanted. People who've read the comics will probably be disappointed with the scale of Secret Invasion because it is a much bigger event. They are taking elements from it, obviously.
Yeah.
Like the MCU's always kind of done this, right? Where it's not everything in the comics is done to the same scale, or yeah, like you're condensing entire comic arcs down into like 2 hour films, right?
Yeah. And at the same time, you can't expect it to either. Like they're working within their own rules. You can't expect them to just change their whole universe to fit this one comic, you know. So it's like I totally get it, but obviously you're going to disappoint fans that are
Yeah, with that
um,
said,
looking
they
forward to
have
that sort of stuff.
absolutely elevated the stakes in this series as to how much the Skrulls have power and sway in the world. Because going into this show, the last we saw them was Captain Marvel or
Hmm.
like Far From Home or whatever, but they're always underground. They're always very low, like small numbers of
Yeah.
people. And even at the start of this series, it was Ben meant it was Talos, and he said like 19 other people were the original Skrulls that came to Earth, right? There was like 20 of them that worked as Nick Fury's kind of
Yeah.
spy base. And then he drops the bomb in the last
Mm.
episode that there's like a million Skrulls on Earth, and that's completely like shot up the stakes
Yeah.
for where this show can
Yeah.
go. I just don't think, given what we've seen so far, that one, the budget can hold the scale of that story, and two, it has to spill over, like you're saying, it has to spill over into the
Yeah.
wider world, and it's kind of strange because they're setting up obviously all this multiverse stuff, they're setting up timeline stuff, they're setting up Kang stuff, and it seems like it's kind of this might get lost along the way
Yeah.
or become really muddled and messed up if they're trying to do two things simultaneously. And I think maybe it would have been a wiser choice to do this first and then move on to Kang, or vice versa. Just get one over and done with, as opposed to having both simultaneously.
It just depends how they interact with each other going forward as well. Because like
But a
I
million
really don't see
scrolls
a
in
link
the Earth
between them.
just hidden, and a lot of them are in places of political power as well, or
Yeah.
cultural power. Is that seems like it's obviously not a
Hmm.
blip level event, but it could quite easily become a blip level event, right? If the Skrulls
Yeah.
start an invasion of it, like an actual invasion of Earth.
Yeah. I do have a big point, and I'm going to save this for the next episode, but it relates to the blip, and
Right.
I think they missed the ball with something. There'll be a little
Okay.
tease for the next one. I think it just relates more to the next episode, so because they kind of mention it. So yeah. Um, but regarding this episode, I don't believe I have anything else to
Yeah.
mention.
Well, naturally,
I think we
this is a shorter episode for us,
summed
but
up.
also a short episode for the actual show as well, right? So like the first 2 episodes were around about an hour, and episode
Yeah,
3 and 4 have
it's like
been around about
37
40
minutes or
minutes.
something like that.
Which
So
the thing is, I'm kind of torn
yeah.
on. That's another issue, not specific to this show, but to Disney Plus in general, with like the Mandalorian as well. Is waiting a week for an episode and getting
Yeah.
an episode that could be half the size of a different episode can be very, very disappointing after you've waited the week. Obviously,
Hmm.
like first world problems, but you're
Yeah.
paying for a service, and
Yeah.
Mando season 3 wasn't incredible, but it's there was a lot of short episodes,
There's a lot of short episodes in that, and the one long
and
episode was just a
exactly the biggest
massive
episode
freaking
was
filler episode.
not
So
really necessary. And it's hard on this, right? Because it's like
yeah.
on one half I'm kind of torn between just tell the story you want to tell the best way you can, and if that means uneven uneven television length to episode lengths, fair enough, just do that. I'd rather have a quality product. On the other
Hmm.
hand, it's a bit annoying to not have like a consistent product.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is for me, at least with this show, as long as the pacing's fine, which to me so far has been good, I'm fine with it. So, for example, if if they added on 20 minutes to this episode, I think it would have dragged on because it's just like what you could like.
Yep.
You've told what you want to do. You've done it well. Move on. You know what
My
I mean? There's no
counterpoint.
point just dragging out for the sake of making it ever long. Whereas stuff like Mando in like Andor or whatever,
More.
you want
Yeah.
longer episodes to establish what's going on. Whereas this, like, I suppose you could do the same thing, but yeah, I don't know. What was you gonna say?
Um. Yeah, I was.
You were gonna
I
make
can't
a point
remember.
there.
It'll come back. It might come back to me in episode
Maybe,
4. So, oh, I'm gonna like
maybe,
episode 3. I'm gonna have to
maybe it'll
leave on
come
a
back.
cliffhanger, and you're gonna have to find out if I
That's
remember
fine.
in episode 4. Yeah. There's your hook.
Oh,
This is what TV's
exactly.
done to us nowadays.
So closing thoughts on Free then. What would you
I
say?
think
What you say is your
obviously
least favorite
again
episode
take
out
into
of the three
circumstance, take
that's
into
happened
account the
this
circumstance
far?
in which I watched the episode. I wasn't like this is the first episode I didn't watch on my TV at home on the couch. I watched this on a plane on my phone. So there's that. But on the other hand, I
Yeah,
also just think, save for that scene where Ben Mendelsohn and Gravik have like their table chat, that's definitely the highlight for this episode for me. And maybe the ending, but the ending of this
yeah,
episode, in terms of how I like that decision, is very much dependent on where they take it in the future. So that's kind of like a different kind of,
yeah,
oh, it could be my favorite scene or not, or it could be a good scene that you remember, because obviously part of that's going to be the resolution and how that plays out.
yeah.
So I think in general, like I still think the series is pretty good. I'd say
Uh-huh.
this is probably, so far, these first 3 episodes are probably not the strongest Marvel show we've had, but they're certainly,
It's pretty
yeah,
consistent so far. Like they're pretty even episodes compared to if you're comparing them with each
yeah.
other.
I think
You know.
I'd say pretty good quality, right? They're in
Yeah, I
general,
think so. It's passable TV. It's nothing I'm gonna rave about,
yeah.
but
I think
I'm enjoying it so far. You know, it's like it's a
something
Marvel
like I
show.
didn't mention last week
You
that I
know.
probably should have was like, especially in the train scene where Nick Fury and Talos are talking. There's a
Yeah.
lot of scenes where I feel like people are out of character, but I don't know.
Right.
Obviously, it's hard to read because one, they might not be who they say they are for certain scenes, so that might
Yeah.
come back at the
I
end.
have a massive point for that
Yeah,
next
same.
episode.
Uh,
So
well, hopefully we're on the same page about that. And then
I think
there's
so.
also things like, I know they're trying to manufacture tension and like mystery around who's on what side and whose allegiances are where. So I get that they have to kind of play up
Mhm.
a bit of that, but at the same time, some of it does feel a little bit forced. Like to me, just
Yeah.
Nick Fury losing his shit on the train. Like I get he's a broken guy and stuff, but like it and him and Talos' little spat. Like spats aren't make like in real life. Spats don't make sense, right? You argue with your friends, you argue with your girlfriend, whatever, and sometimes you say shit and you don't mean it, and you're like, oh fuck. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
And it quickly got resolved this episode.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of pointless in the end anyway.
But so it's not really
Um,
criticism, but I guess it kind of is because characters. Because the thing is, I feel like if you're gonna make the argument that, oh, these kind of arguments are more realistic, then I think that only works for a show that is. I don't want to be like highbrow here and be like, oh like noncy, but poncy, but like definitely don't want to be noncy. But you know what I mean? Like I don't want to be like, so like, oh well, this kind of content, this highbrow, this very intellectual character discussion should be in a show of higher quality. Like it's a Marvel show, right? So like your expectations are
yeah,
set. So like they might come out as like an absolute banger, but you're not expecting like a Citizen Kane, right? So like it's kind of
exactly.
hard to take that argument of like, oh, it's not lazy, it's great cinema. And it's like, well, Marvel doesn't have the best track record for that
Yeah,
right now, so it's hard. But again, I mean, well, a little off
right
track,
now.
but in general, I think this season's been so far. The first 2 episodes are pretty consistent, like you say. They're not.
Yeah,
I'd say they're probably all going to be ranked around the same quality. Obviously, like within that, my rank is probably 1, 2, 3. But
yeah.
I do think a big part of episode 1, obviously Maria dying. I think that obviously set things in motion. But I think maybe we hadn't had enough with Maria and Nick as like a duo. So like already the series is kind of,
Which is weird because we've had them for
yeah.
ages, but it didn't feel like I
But
didn't feel
not only
emotional when
that,
it
but
happened. You know, I was like,
she's
oh no,
already been forgotten.
whatever.
Like
You know?
you see her, I think in episode 4,
Yeah,
there's like a they bring up a clip or something of the thing, but
Yeah.
there's no like you still don't. I've never felt the weight of Nick like having like a lasting impression of losing his like second-hand woman.
I liked the bit with the mum, but that was
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
That was the only
But like
part
that's
where
fine.
that
But
didn't
that's what I
carry
meant.
on.
That's why I specifically said like a lasting impression because that was like the funeral, right?
Yeah.
So that makes sense why he'd be like thingy there. But he has
Mhm.
lost his like lifelong partner, not in the sense of romanticism, but like lifelong partner in the sense of
Yeah.
professional lifelong partner, and he
Yeah.
doesn't really give a shit like 2 episodes later, kind of thing. I'm a bit like, oh, like if you were gonna go
Mhm.
like that route of showing a broken Nick Fury, it just makes sense to kind of use that as fuel, which I don't feel like they're doing. But again,
Yeah. Because Gravik killed her looking like him. So what the last thing she saw was her best
true.
friend
Yeah.
killing her, and she didn't know because she died before you could tell her. So, so like he should be a little bit more vengeful, but
Yeah.
it's what it is. I get your point. That's a good point. But
Yeah, I think a lot of these discussions that we're having,
yeah,
I like especially this one. I think probably better suited to maybe like an end of season discussion, right? But it's hard not to bring them up on the way as well.
yeah, just see where it all wraps up because there's something happens in the next episode where I think does tie in to what
Yep.
we're talking about, and it was a big thing we mentioned at the time, so I think
Oh yeah,
that'd be a
I
good
completely
talking point
forgot.
too.
At the end of this episode,
But
there wasn't just one hook; there was two hooks as well, wasn't there? Obviously, this will come up in our next episode a lot more. But um,
yeah,
we have a voice over the phone, and whose voice is that, Brandon? And whose voice is on the phone?
voice for the phone. When does that happen?
Fucking Don Cheadle, bro.
Oh right,
Fucking
right,
Don
right.
Cheadle on the goddamn
Yeah,
phone. So
yeah.
it seems like, well, it is right. Like they've been setting it up, but I honestly thought he was a red herring as well. That he was going to be a bit like,
Mhm.
is he, isn't he? And that it was going to be kind of they pull the rug out from under your feet, and it was going to be oh he actually isn't, and he's just a dick for some reason. But obviously in this episode they suggest that he is actually a Skrull as well. So
Yeah.
which I think a lot. I
True.
expected going into the series, so it's not. The thing is as well, I also don't want the Game of Thrones approach where it's like I want them to subvert my expectations for the sake of subverting them. Predictability is not always a bad thing,
Yeah.
right? Like just because you can predict that Rhodey was a Skrull does not necessarily mean that's a bad decision to follow that through if they do something interesting with it.
Because it makes sense, like we mentioned before.
Yeah.
It makes sense, like why a Skrull would want to be in
And
his
honestly, I
position.
think if this show is gonna do really well towards the end and they follow that through, I would rather they took an obvious choice and followed it through well than did a Game of
Mhm.
Thrones and just like just threw shit at the wall and just seen what worked
Yeah.
and it doesn't make sense to the audience.
They still got more episodes though, so
Yeah.
they might.
Well,
Who knows?
even though right, so this is the thing, like we took a break off for this week, so I was trying to like talk about this episode as if I hadn't seen the next one, but obviously we have the context of the next episodes. There's sprinkles of that here, but like
Yeah.
we've seen the next episode as well, so we know where some of these answers are. But for
Yeah.
reasons, for episode reasons, we've decided to pretend. But
Break up. Just be consistent with what we've
yeah,
already done.
um, but I'm
Um.
happy to close on
But
there. I
yeah.
mean, I do you want to give general thoughts on this
Yeah. I'm
episode,
happy.
like where you'd maybe reiterate?
I think I like it more than episode two, but like I said before, it's kind of just they're all quite
Yep.
even to me. So it's even hard. It's kind of even hard to rank them because they're all just kind of consistent with each other.
I mean, yeah,
Um. Yeah. But
yep.
I'm a fan
I
of.
was gonna
I
say
like that.
that's a compliment. Even though like maybe the qualities, I would obviously we're always rather that the TV show was better, but I'll take consistency over having like a 9 out of 10 episode than a 6 out of 10 episode as well.
Oh yeah, exactly. I'd rather it be like if it's a consistently seven, I'll take that rather than 1-9, but then there's a seven and then there's a six. Oh, there's a really bad episode. It's like that's just too much. Like because that
Yeah.
just puts you off
Depends on the
watching
show
it
obviously,
weekly.
but
Because you're like you don't know what to expect. But at least
I
with
feel
this
like
show, it's kind of
yeah.
consistent. Really, I know I'm looking what I'm getting.
So yeah, I'm happy to close there, and then
But yeah,
we'll see you back here for episode 4 of Secret Invasion. I would say next week,
yes
but it's
sir.
going to be in about 5 minutes for us, so we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Yep.